Welcome to our second conversation and roundtable at Mint. We were just talking about manufacturing, so many important points that were raised with regards to taxation calibration, with regards to what's happening with tariffs across the country, really, and with regards to the kind of support the manufacturing sector now needs. As I mentioned earlier, two sides of the same coin. What about infrastructure? The headline moment last year was the NIP, or the National Infrastructure Pipeline. At this point, it seems to be that the grand or great focus is on urban infrastructure, road transport, energy, railways, all of that. But this is a good point to stand and just take stock of the situation. Remember, at this point, in terms of growth targets for our country, we're standing at about, according to the NSO, 9.2%. That is, though, in real terms, not a big achievement or step forward from where things were. So much needs to be done, and there are no two sides to this argument. Infrastructure is and has to be the backbone of that recovery. Lots and lots of voices weighing in from all the disparate parts of infrastructure on what now needs to be done. Let me quickly introduce our panelists to all our audience members today. Khairul Nissa, who is Executive Director, WT Services at World Trade Center. Rajan Bandelkar, who is President of the National Real Estate Development Council. Vinayak Chatterjee, Chairman and co-founder of Feedback Infrastructure Services Limited. Shailesh Pathak, who's co-chair of the Committee of Transport Infrastructure at FICCI. And perhaps in a bit, we'll get in a few more voices from the real estate sector specifically to add more perspective. Welcome to all of you. Vinayak, I'm going to turn to you to sort of have opening comments to really set a report card in place, and then we can go from here. Let's treat where we're standing at as the midterm assessment point for NIP. What has gotten done? How much of a shortfall or how much of a fallback have we got over the last 3 years? And what needs to get kick-started, perhaps with the budget as the first step, but what needs to get kick-started this year?
So thank you. Let me start with your last point first, because that is the logical backdrop, I suspect, for much of the discussions that will follow. Let's take a look at the budget. The last year's budget at 5.54 lakh crores was a 26% jump over the previous year. And that was very well received. A 26% jump last year was well received. Now, this year, as you rightly said, public works and infrastructure development is still going to be considered the prompt primer for economic growth in a situation where private capex is still somewhat languid. Now, therefore, the broad expectation from the budget is a 25% increase in the budgetary outlay over last year, which would take 5.54 lakhs of last year to 7 lakh crores. So that is the broad expectation. And the only other point I want to make on the budget, and to link your point with NIP, is that NIP is broadly 22 lakh crores per annum. That is the broad spend. It's simple. If you divide 111 by 5, you will get 22 lakh crores. Now, the question before investors, analysts is, does India have the funding capacity to fund the ambition of the NIP? Now, the point I want to make for your listeners is that the good news is that India has reached a level of maturity of being able to fund the NIP ambition of 22 lakh crores. And I will tell you how simply. If the union budget does 7 lakh crores, if the states together, the combined states outlay on infrastructure does 6 lakh crores, public sector units and extra budgetary resources does 2 lakh crores, if the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development can rev up to about 3 lakh crores of disbursements, which I'm sure Mr. Kamath is trying to do, and domestic and foreign capital contribute 4 lakh crores, roughly 20% as envisaged in the NIP document. If you add all of this together, it is very reasonable. All these bits of arithmetic are pretty reasonable assumptions. And if added together, they would buttress the point that India has reached a certain level of maturity in able to have the confidence of the funding capability of funding 22 lakh crores of infra spend in keeping with the ambitions of the NIP. And the last point here is that this budget is expected to be far more implementation heavy, because a lot of announcements had already happened last year. And I am expecting the budget to actually take a very strong position on aggressive implementation of Gati Shakti, the national single window system for clearances, surety bonds as a substitute for bank guarantees, etc., etc., so that it will push implementation aspects very hard for the policy announcements that have been made during the course of the year. But let me stop.
Okay, I'm going to circle back to you, particularly on the shortfall, Vinayak, because we know what needs to be done, but we also know that there's a shortfall from the last 3 years. Let me turn to Mr. Rajan Bandelkar. So just give us a sense of how the last year and a half has been for real estate, and what specifically you're looking for in terms of support going ahead.
Uh, First of all, thank you very much. See, the last year, as we all know, practically almost 2 years by now, okay, it's in pandemic. So everybody knows what we have done. And fortunately for real estate, home has become a very, very important term for last 2 years. It's either stay at home, work from home quarantine, wherever you say home was there. So I take things other way around. I always see an opportunity in a problem. So real estate is, many of my colleagues don't like me telling this, but I always tell what I like. So I tell it's a blessing in disguise for real estate. And you must have seen from all the figures, whatever you people experts quote, the real estate has done phenomenally better in last entire 1 decade. Matlab, the people who had stocks, who thought that the stocks were not selling for last at least 4 or 5 years, all the stocks are sold out. There's no inventory, ready inventory. I once again repeat, ready inventory left for anybody. Moreover, we were all the government agencies and everybody was thinking that we are not so important, or rather the bad segment of the industry. But fortunately for them, they understood that a home is very, very important. Once again, thanks to Narendra Modi ji, he has put in a dream in each and every Indian that every Indian should have shelter over his head before 2022. And fortunately, we are in 2022. I would not say the dream is complete or accomplished, but yeah, we are on the right path. And because of that, you can see today realtors are started getting the required due respect, because when we tell roti, kapda and makan is one of the important aspect of every human being's life. And we are the only people, developers, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, whether you love them, whether you hate them, they only provide you. I know we were doing many things wrong, but thanks to RERA, all the people who are not coming into line, they are forced to be in the line, or they are forced to out of be the business. If you are asking with the budget, yes, of course. See, government, whenever they want to, government wants to give us anything, they think we are the people. We are the people. कि बाबा इनको जरूरत क्या है? मतलब they already have everything. Unfortunately, but this time what we are asking, basic, we are asking not for us. We are asking for the consumers. We are telling whatever the interest deduction on a home loan. See, government is giving us only 2 lakhs rupees as interest deduction, which is a very, very, very meager amount, because this 2 lakhs was fixed up, if I'm not wrong, more than a decade ago. You see the inflation rate, whatever has come, and when government itself in their you take political agenda everywhere, wherever they are telling housing for all, homes for all, they want to see that every Indian has their own home. So they have to give prioritize this. So our first request is that whatever for first loan, whenever anybody takes his first loan, entire interest amount, I repeat, entire interest amount should be deducted as income tax. Because see, shelter is the basic need of any Indian. How can you tell he can't have that much ability, liberty, and priority to live in a proper place? So that is the first thing. Second, of course, easy funding. Easy fundings, thanks to Corona period, the government has given ECLGS, Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme. Whenever government has given guarantee, we have got loans at a very cheaper rate. We are very happy. Why I am telling you, we feel it's blessing in disguise, because we never, majority of the developer, Hiranandani must have seen in a single digit rate of interest for loan, but we have never seen But fortunately, majority of the developer have seen the rate of interest coming down sub 10%. So which was a very good thing. So we are requesting government for all affordable segments, where the projects they are doing, the government should guarantee it. And because today RERA is there, we can't misuse the money, we can't divert the money. So that would be a win-win situation for a developer as well as consumer. I think I
Sure.
would like to stop here. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. No, you raised some important points. Khair, if I can turn to you and just sort of rephrase the question a little bit in terms of what your experience or observation has been for the commercial side of what's happening with real estate, part one, and secondly, whether you agree that this is a good way to go about it via the budget. Think about the end consumer and try and make things as easy as possible for that last mile in order to help the sector, down the line.
See, let me first actually state this that for India, I mean, wherein we are aiming to be a $5 trillion economy by 2024, this is, and the rapid urbanization that the country is facing, real estate is one sector which actually needs to be given the status of an infrastructure, you know. And though the focus for the government has largely been housing for all, but it is the entire spectrum of the real estate, all the assets of the real estate, which we need to keep the focus on. Because one, we are the largest employment generator. We contribute to the GDP and the economy. We're one of the largest contributors to the economy. And we need to be looking at, when we are looking at housing, we have seen that across other countries, that housing jobs is equivalent to housing demand, is equivalent to, I mean, it leads down to commercial office space workspaces, not just the commercial space but the office workspace, whether it is industrial, whether it is different asset classes of commercial real estate. They all actually are interlinked. And I believe that RERA has been a very, very good, initiative which has been taken by the government, the implementation of RERA, but it is still implemented in very few states, not all of the states. There are still certain few states which still need to have RERA implemented there. But then the intent is there. Then REIT, the commercial real estate, and we see that for investments, for international investments to come in, REIT is one of the major ways of looking at investments. And the real estate in India, we have seen that access to finance has been one of the major hindrances for expansion for the developers. But these are the time, the urbanization, the faster development that Indian real estate is taking place. There's a lot of intent of the government on collaborations, and these collaborations are of the PPP, the developers, the private players, the entire multi stakeholders of the real estate. So I think that we did see pandemic, that work from home did contribute to less absorption of commercial real estate, but the investment opportunities which the different asset classes of real estate, of commercial real estate, is actually providing is immense. With international companies also looking at India, and the various initiatives of the government like Make in India, Made for India, the startup. So there's a huge demand for commercial real estate which is going to be taking place. We're very positive about 2022 and 23 onwards for the commercial
Okay.
real estate.
Okay, sure. Let me just take a step away from real estate for a second and talk about the other aspects of it. Shailesh, what does the industry want to hear, even by way of intent? Because really, that's the thing with infrastructure. The budget really doesn't impact things in terms of what happens to a year or a multi-year process. But what do you want to hear?
Thank you, Mitali. I'd say that the questions to ask are really what to do, how to do it, and how to finance it. And over the last 18 months, a lot of these questions have been answered. So, what to do has been, the four N's I mentioned: the National Infrastructure Pipeline, the National Monetization Pipeline, the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, and of course the NPMPF, which is the National Program and Project Management Policy Framework. So what to do is answered by the NIP. You've got a list of projects over the next 5 years. How to finance it is done by the NAPFED, the DFI. How to do it actually is the more critical question. And that clearly is not part of the budget. That is about implementation. And at the end of the day, the budget is an income and expenditure statement along with a very good speech that effectively lays out the year ahead policy. So, what are the 5 things that we would like to see? We would actually like to see coordination. So, let me begin with 4 C's again. The first C is coordination. There is a lot of coordination now at the Government of India level among departments and ministries. The same level of coordination is needed at the level of the states and the cities, because that is where the infrastructure is going to get built, not in the union capital of Delhi. And to that extent, the PM Gati Shakti mission is an excellent innovation. I attended a day-long orientation on that. And if only states and cities could come on board Gati Shakti mission, that will be huge. The second is capacity. And capacity about tendering, the capacity about contract management, the capacity about putting a project together and making sure that it gets delivered in time and cost. The third, I'd say, is contracts. One of the biggest failings that we have in India as compared to, let's say, the G20 nations or the BRICS nations is our inability of contract enforcement and dispute resolution. So we would be very happy to see a specific construction law. And this is in vogue in most developed countries in the world, where prompt payments are taken care of, dispute resolution is taken care of. And finally, I'd say, construction is the biggest job creator in this economy. Over the next 10, 20 years, other panelists have also mentioned this, a lot of people will move from agriculture to industry and services. Now, the one sector that can absorb a lot of unskilled labor, both women and men, is the construction sector. And how do we get the construction sector going? Whether it is for real estate or it is for infrastructure, boils down to putting cement and mortar and inputs and labor together. So construction sector as a whole needs much more focus and implementation. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Lots of points to discuss, including the legal side of it, which I will get to in a bit. Mr. Hiranandani, welcome, sir. Thank you for joining in. One more real estate voice. There have been two fairly optimistic ones. Now you represent the top end of the pyramid in terms of what's happening in real estate and housing, sir. Would it be fair to say that the situation is disparate, just like it is for the economy, where there is one section that has largely come out of the pandemic unscathed, but for the lower end, for lower income housing, it's been difficult?
Thank you very much, Mithali. I think the issues are very clear. Government under the PMAY scheme is making 1.1 crore houses where you have a 3% interest subsidy, which is funding 1.1 crore houses. A 3% interest subsidy for 15 years has been given, and 60,000 crores have already been dispersed in this housing for the affordable segment. We can't see it in Delhi and Mumbai and important towns because the price point has been fixed up to 45 lakhs. But countrywide, yes, this has had an effect. But I think I would like to see this extended to cities like Mumbai, Delhi, especially cities like Mumbai, where 45-50% of the population still live in jhopatpattis. So that's a challenge that we are definitely going to face. 3-4 things I'd like to flag off on that. Number one, I think Rajan Bandilkar took the issue of what the home loan segment and the interests should be increased. But also, I think now a feature on rental housing needs to be done. As we are all aware, all the big companies internationally want to invest only in commercial because the returns are about 7% plus. But in residential housing, the returns are 2 to 3%. I think the budget needs to intervene over here if rental housing, which the Prime Minister is talking about and the Housing Minister is talking about, we need to see that the deduction, standard deduction of 30% needs to be increased to 50%. If you really want to give a boost to this rental housing and investment in this segment also by international investors. So that's one of the things which I'd like to add for the purposes in the budget that we really need to do. Second point, which is very important, is the fact that if you do concentrate on real estate and infrastructure, like Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee just mentioned, I think you can go well beyond 10% GDP growth plus give employment. If you do only manufacturing, you may increase GDP, but you cannot increase employment of potential because real estate and infrastructure absorb skilled and unskilled people. And as we move from the agricultural society to the others, I think this becomes important. And all countries who have a double-digit GDP growth have focused on real estate and infrastructure in order to lead that. That is how China did it. That's how various countries of the world have done it. And that's why the Western economies cannot grow at a faster pace, because real estate and infrastructure is not a part of their portfolio today. The third part, which I would like to flag off, is the fact that, as both of the speakers have said, flagged off on infrastructure, I want to focus on one place where the infrastructure has really taken off in spite of all the contrarian statements. This is the Mumbai metropolitan region. We have now got 300 kilometers of metro lines doing it. Of course, there's a problem of one of the depots, which is a discussion point. We have the Cross Harbour Bridge, the 22 kilometers across the sea to connect land, which will be equivalent to half the land of Mumbai being connected to South Mumbai. We have the Navi Mumbai Airport. We have the Mumbai Panvel Karjat railway line, which extends the central railway from VT to Panvel to Karjat, which is now being constructed. The Western Coastal Road, which is there. All this is 3 lakh crores of rupees. Now, the total investment in infrastructure, and Vinay can correct me if I'm wrong, the total investment in the Mumbai metropolitan region for the last 60 years by center and state governments was 30,000 crores. Now in 5 years, we'll be investing 3 lakh crores and 85% of the work is operational. So we do have things which are moving in a positive manner. And I'm giving you one example. Vinayak will probably give you 10 such examples where things are moving on. And though I agree entirely with Mr. Khair that there is issue of implementation which has become a challenge. So all in all, we are seeing a positive direction in which it is going. However, execution is still an issue countrywide, though we see Mr. Gadkari doing 35 kilometers of national highway per day instead of 4, which he inherited at the time when he took over. So you do see positive signs which are taking place. If we can continue to do that, and also, as Mr. Khair said, as Mr. Pathak said correctly, about having all the issues, the 3 or 4 issues that he mentioned about funding, organization, direction, and others, I think all these put together is going to make it. So the budget needs to be aggressive in terms of investment into these sectors and also coordinate the execution policies in order that things will be done. You can't have a fight between the central and state government about where you should have one of the depots for the purposes of metro. It's quite ridiculous. I think they need to put an end to it very quickly. So all in all, I think positive, but you do need to remove some of the glitches which are coming in the way of our progress. People deserve better.
No, thank you for that. And you raise an important point, which I am going to delve into a bit deeper. Vinayak, I'm coming back to you, though, on this NIP issue. I'm sorry to be stuck on it, but I think it's important to sort of be cognizant of where things stand. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. We've got currently 9,300 projects over 34 sectors. We've got till 2025, but there is obviously a shortfall that has occurred, in the first part. How acute would you say the shortfall is? What needs to be done to cover this up? And is it financing which is the main problem? What's the pinprick here?
First point, Mitali, is financing is not the main problem. There is financing available. I think that point we can gradually now take out of the discussions on infra. The to be honest with you, project-wise appreciation of where the delays are specifically for NIP has not been done yet. So I don't have the data the way you're asking for it, saying which are the projects delayed. But I will share with you a concern that other speakers have raised. Shailesh has raised it, Mr. Hiranandani has raised it, and others have raised it. Is a question of project execution and project delays, which are chronic in our system. And one of the worrying points is the latest report from the Ministry of Program Implementation and Statistics in the first week of December, which highlights the fact that the financial value of delayed projects, where the cost escalation has gone up, it has documented the fact that 1,679 centrally sponsored projects have been reviewed by the ministry. Out of the 1,671, 541 projects have been grossly delayed. The total quantum of investments envisaged is 20.6 lakh crores and 21 crores, and it has already touching 26 lakh crores. So as you can see, this is a fresh report in December from the ministry, which documents a cost to the nation of almost 5 lakh crores, 4.6 to be exact, on account of a 20% increase in project cost because of delays in execution. Now, please remember, 4.6 upon last year's budget outlay of 5.54 is 79%, which means 79% of the outlays announced last year in the budget have been eaten up by delayed projects. So the point is that this issue is receiving, it is not that the government is not alive to the intensity of the execution problem and resultant delays. Shailesh mentioned the national program on project implementation, which was undertaken by a combination of the Quality Council of India and Niti Aayog. The Prime Minister himself monitors a platform called Pragati in the PMO. The old project management group of the last 2 years of the UPA has now been housed in the Ministry of Commerce under Department DPIIT that maintains their own e-platform. So from all these angles, project management and execution is receiving the due attention. And two technical problems, two technologically advanced solutions, Gati Shakti and National Single Window System, have been very superior, very intense, and very engaged technical tools to monitor delays in projects, including satellite monitoring of projects. So the reason I'm saying all of this is to basically answer your simple question that the problem of delays in execution remains. It is being taken very seriously by the government. It is being reviewed, and there are a variety of programs and platforms that are attacking this problem. So I am actually positive in seeing that in the months and years to come, the intensity of this problem should, with all these measures, show a decreasing trend. But let me stop here.
No, I
Mithali,
agree.
may I add something here? May I
Yeah.
add something here? That another thing that what one needs to actually also look at is the efficient use of land, because land is something which we are finding is one of the most important components for real estate. And in India, we see that there is mostly a horizontal use of land that we have, and it is becoming dearth. We need to be looking at vertical growth, and we need to be actually having some incentives or SOPs for even for cities which are actually going and reforming their FSI norms, or going for vertical. I mean,
Yeah.
this budget, we could probably look at the central government funding cities, especially like smart cities initiatives. We've got various other initiatives which can take up these FSI reforms for, especially for the vertical growth. So if we look at removing the permission, the single window clearance, we look at access to finance, we look at technology, reduction of costs, due to new technology adoption. We look at the reform in the rental, amending the rental laws. These are things that could be looked at as a way forward, and that this is something that should be a way forward for the government and expected from the budget, where is incentives, where is reforms, and where is SOPs that could encourage these things.
Yeah, no, no, I hear you. And the reason I'm smiling is because that was, the exact question I was going to raise. Shailesh, Mr. Hiranandani raises an interesting point about this conundrum of, working with central policies versus state implementation. One point of view is to centralize it all, but as the experience has been, that has not worked efficiently. For example, the Land Acquisition and Rehabilitation Act. Right now, the center has one version, but then states have their own versions of it. Same thing with, way back in 2008, where you had the Cape Town Convention. I don't think that has been adopted in any form and fashion. How do you resolve this center state push and pull? Because ultimately, that project has to live in the state where it resides. But there is an overarching central opinion or central narrative. How does infrastructure sort of, find a safe middle path over here?
That's actually a very good question, Vitali. And before going into the constitution, let me share some success stories.
Okay.
Success story number one is the Jal Jeevan Mission. So, August 2019, 1 out of 6 women in India, rural women, 19 crores, 192 million, only 1 out of 6 rural women had taps in their household. Today, more than half have taps in their household. And this has happened dramatically over the last 2.5 years. You've not heard of it because most of them are not English speaking people. Success story number two is the Mumbai Delhi Expressway, which Mr. Gadkari is piloting admirably. Success story number three is the expressway is being constructed in Uttar Pradesh. The Purvanchal Expressway is done, the Ganga Expressway is getting started. So, if you want to do it, you can work together with the union government. Incidentally, there's no center in the constitution, there's a union government and the state governments. And as you said, the infrastructure is going to be built in the state and the city. Typically, what happens is we think that this is a head office of a company with a branch in a state capital. That's not the way it works. The union government and the state governments are at par. And if they start working together, you get a lot done. If they do not work together, then the Mumbai Ahmedabad high speed rail project gets delayed because the land acquisition in the state of Gujarat is nearly complete. The land acquisition in the state of Maharashtra is getting there. So I think it's all about the willingness to work together. But more importantly, from the private sector side, what I really see is the translation of the union government's 2014 speech in parliament by the president, the first speech by the president. And in that speech, a lot of these initiatives had been mentioned. I'm happy to see that most of them have been already executed and delivered. So we've got some success stories. Looking at the next 4 or 5 years, I get the feeling that trunk infrastructure between large cities will get completed. So the expressways will get done, the railway lines, the high-speed rail will get done, the gas pipelines, transmission lines will all get done. After 2030, what will really keep growing is our cities. So give me an example here. 2002, as our friends from Mumbai would know, the Mumbai-Pune Expressway was commissioned. Ever since then, there has not been another expressway or a third expressway, but Mumbai and Pune as cities have grown like this. So this is what is going to drive India's economic growth. It is time that we look at our cities much more seriously. And the catch there is that under the constitution, the 7th schedule, Government of India has nothing to do with cities. It is only the states that are in charge of cities. And it is the states that will either decide to put forward their cities as economic growth drivers or they will hold it back. Thanks.
Mr. Pandelkar, I realize you're using the crisis as opportunity and seeing the glass as half full, which is great. But there is another half empty side of it, which is the fact that I don't think industry largely has lived through such an inflationary environment in the face of the kind of growth pressures that we're facing right now. I mean, the kind of input cost pressures that every industry, including yours, has seen have been, frankly, completely one way on steel and on other input costs. Do you need any help in that regard, or are you viewing this as a transitory environment? How much pressure does it put in a situation where I don't think you have that much leeway to tinker with prices?
See, fortunately, builders deal with all the situation.
Mhm.
So what happens? Ki this is I know ki it is going to erode entire margin of all the developers who are going to work for another at least 2 years, 2 to 3 years if the prices doesn't come down. Because the price rise, whatever is there, I don't mind telling it because we already complained to competition commission also. Because I don't mind calling a spade a spade. Because when people are doing wrong, when we did wrong, people were calling us we were wrong. So if somebody is doing wrong, we should be also bold enough to tell them what you are doing is wrong. So we have written the letters to all the people. But I know, as it is told that Rome is not built in a day, so their lobby is much more stronger. So it is not going to get affected. But the burnt will go on to the end consumer only. You try and understand. See, in Indian economy, the only one person who suffers all the time, who let anybody do anything, only the person who suffers is the consumer. So we are trying our level best. We are making representation. We have told our Ministry of Housing also to get into it. Even though I can tell you off the record, Durga Shankar Mishra, when he was secretary, he was taking it up very aggressively. Unfortunately, yeah, we haven't seen the light of the day on that issue. But yeah, what happens is the second advantage, what we have, we are there. The blessing in disguise is that the way I see always a negative and a positive thing is that rate of interest hasn't gone up, and the rate of interest are at their best for both, as well as home loans, as well as for developers also. The same way, when I told you in my earlier also, if the government hears us out from your this conversation also, and if they extend that credit line guarantee scheme, so that would be once again a blessing, and we can be there. Bolta hai na ki if something is lost somewhere, we might get something somewhere.
Mr. Hiranandani, come in on that. What's your view of the inflationary environment, especially when there are sectors, within the entire complex, especially in services, whether it's hospitality or others who are in any case struggling with the situation themselves. You're on mute, sir.
Yes, the input costs have just gone up the roof. Cement, steel, and other items doing it. Labor costs have also shot up. And I think this is going to be a problem, especially in the affordable segment where the margins are very crushed. I think you're going to see a price rise in the affordable housing sector for sure, because there is hardly any margin left. Earlier, because there was so much stock available in the affordable housing segment, finished stock and under construction cost, that they were also partly relatable to old input costs, which had gone into the buildings of these apartments in the affordable housing segment. We didn't see a price rise taking place. But now with the improved sales in 2021, I think you will see in 2022 a price rise definitely taking place across the board, but affordable segment probably as a percentage will be higher. You're going to see that input costs going up. Because of the input costs going up, the final price is definitely going up. Number two, there are a large number of input costs where we are not able to get the credits which are there for the input costs. For instance, the cement, the GST is 28%. And on the sale price of the apartments, whether it is affordable or not, we don't get a credit for the input costs. So all this is causing inflationary tendency in the housing segment, which is not really worthwhile. So I think these couple of changes will require to be done in order to see that the affordability of housing is maintained. And we still have a long way to go in spite of all the other schemes which are there across the country in order to provide housing, and of course the infrastructure, which is languishing for so many years. All in all, I think the direction is correct, the intent is there, but we have to see that the final execution, some of it which we are able to see, but some of it is still languishing. And I think you're going to see some problem in this area in terms of inflationary costs happening in 2022 for sure. And I'm just hoping that the prices of other raw material costs will also come down, hopefully, in this period of time. And if they do, of course, this problem will not arise. But as it stands today, it will.
No, that's a fair warning, and I think that indeed will be something to deal with, or something that consumers are already dealing with. Khair, the second part of my question to Mr. Hiranandani, if you could address that, what's your experience in some of the services sectors like hospitality, tourism, that are really struggling, frankly, on both ends? I mean, they're struggling with inflationary inputs, the business environment is not very strong, and now there is talk of looking at social infrastructure, in a greater degree rather than physical infrastructure. Do you think all of that will get addressed or ought to get addressed in this year?
See,
Mitali,
very
you have touched the soft underbelly of the situation, which not many people are talking about. Thank you for raising this important point, because I think this segment has actually been the underdog, and nobody has been able to do anything for them except to close it down. So what they have done is close it down, and close it down. So I think they are really suffering. So restaurants, hotels, hospitality, travel, tourism, even media to some extent also is grossly affected in this situation. We have not seen any relief in this segments from the government, either from the center or the states. And we had represented from various associations, CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM. I'd been president last year of ASSOCHAM. I had specifically represented for this segment. Government at that point of time had given some relief to MSMEs in terms of credit availability. But that was not possible for most of the segment who have really closed down. How do you take credit for a business which is closed down or it doesn't have business? So that credit availability was given to maybe 25% of the people who were really affected in the MSME sector. But travel, tourism, hospitality, restaurants, media, I don't see any relief whatsoever. In the housing segments, we did see some relief coming from certain governments. For instance, Maharashtra reduced stamp duty by 60% and development charges by 50% and then 40%. So we did see some relief, and the buying came back and sprung back. It was more from a demand-oriented side rather than from the government side only that the benefit came. But I would look forward to some other benefits to come in these sectors quickly, because I still see a problem just now. I've been talking to the segments in travel and tourism, hospitality, media too. I think we see a lot of pain not being addressed by the government of the day, which is happening.
Sure.
In fact, to
Okay.
add to what Mr. Hiranandani just said, most of the, when it comes to retail, if you look at retail or F&B, they were the first ones who actually suffered during the lockdown. They were the first ones wherein the government had a diktat that they need to be closing down. So they have really suffered. And it has been, any relief that has been given has been by the private developers as a private initiative, to the retail, to the hospitality. The developers have actually come forth to help the businesses, but not the government. And that is one area that we should really look at some support from the government. Yes.
Absolutely. Point well taken. Vinayak, I'm saving all the prickly ones for you. What about asset monetization? What happened to that whole plan? Where do things stand? A lot of very valid, criticism was raised about what the roadmap looked like about this leasing of infrastructure. Do you expect to hear more details in the budget?
Yes, I do. The basic construct of the National Monetization Plan is that family silver is not sold because of political resistance from different quarters about selling state-owned assets. So it did a bypass by talking about monetization, which is a different way of saying that they will get liquidity out of these assets for the government through long-term concessions under PPP frameworks. That is basically the scheme. Now, from the first day the scheme was announced, among others, I was one of the first who welcomed the economic construct that on the one hand you use EPC to build new projects, and on the other hand you unlock liquidity from existing assets that government owns, because government has no real business to running bus stations and various other facilities. So you might as well sell them. But the government couldn't take a call on selling them. The government is only monetizing them, and it has to monetize them under PPP frameworks. Now that is where the problem is, that right now across the last 7 to 10 years, PPP has a very severe credibility issue with private sector, in the sense that there is a loss of confidence in level playing fields, in independent regulation, in renegotiation, in justice, on many, many counts. There is a loss of confidence where private companies do not want to invest in PPP formats unless they are very, very happily convinced that there is a level playing field and that the future relationship between public and private is protected. Now, therefore, I understand that Niti Aayog has raised this issue significantly with the finance minister, and so have other constituents of leading political parties. That the PPP framework has to be made robust and must once again be revitalized to give confidence to potential private investors, and the NMP depends on it. So I am expecting this budget to announce certain initiatives and measures to revamp the PPP frameworks. That's a straight answer to your straight questions. It is one of the main expectations from the budget, other than similar policy resets in the case of SEZs, etc., etc. But on the other specifics, I can talk later. But this is to specifically address your question on NMP. NMP has a correlation with PPP format, and the budget is going to address that.
Okay, we'll wait to see those details. Shailesh, there is another reality which exists, which is, aside from what may have happened during the pandemic, which is the situation for the MSMEs, which has not been easy, frankly, not since the last 2 years, but since demonetization. Some industry bodies have come forward and said, I mean, all the point about a single window clearance, etc., is taken, but they are making the point that MSMEs are struggling with delayed payments. It's a request to the government to release dues. It's a request to the government to clear outstanding payments, tax refunds. How would you define the condition for the MSMEs at this point? And do you agree that there seems to be a kind of a money crisis which they need urgent attention and support with? If that means clearing all their payments, please do it.
The reality is that there is a specific act under which MSME payments have to be made within a time limit. And this act has been introduced in the last few years. So today, if I am an MSME and I'm not getting paid by either a private corporate or a government, I can actually go and appeal to that council and they will give me enablement to get my payment. So that's on MSMEs. And we must realize that all large companies in India are not islands unto themselves. They all have their subcontractors and vendors, and a lot of them are MSMEs. So it's an entire ecosystem, and it is to the benefit of the larger companies if MSMEs are operating on positive cash flow rather than negative cash flow. And as you know, most industry associations, including FICCI, most of our members are MSMEs. And again, most employment in India is not generated by the large companies and certainly not by the startups. It is largely MSMEs. But if I can go back a step and add to what Vinayak talked about on the national monetization pipeline. According to my numbers, NHAI has raised 17,400 crores in the last 2.5 years because of asset monetization. Power Grid Corporation has raised another 7,000. There have been areas of underperformance in the sectors in the NMP, but we have a fair idea of which assets are up for grabs, or not grabs really, or for monetization. I often used to talk about, caterpillars turning into butterflies. And the same construct applies to construction projects turning into cash flow yielding assets. So caterpillars are ugly to look at and butterflies are beautiful. Foreign investors, dollar investors, are not looking at construction risk in India. They are looking at operating cash flows in India. And when we talk about the PPP system not working, PPP 1.0, which was largely 2007 to 12, was all about construction PPPs. And we know what happened there. And a lot of the bank non-performing assets are because of that misadventure. But the PPP now that we're talking about is operating cash flow monetization. And I would always bet on a cash flow statement rather than a spreadsheet. So PPPs in monetization are bound to do much better than the earlier PPP 1.0. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to circle around with last comments, but Vinayak, very quickly, if I can get a comment from you on this. I mean, it's not strictly part of our conversation, but even last year there was so much talk about examining the idea of an urban Narega scheme, creating something that creates employment that then supports city infrastructure. Do you think that is a valid argument, and do you think it might get addressed given the situation that we have in terms of urban unemployment?
See, there is a lot of economic literature in the last 16 months of many India-centric economists having asked the government to create an urban Manrega. So you are bang on in your asking the question, should that be done? I think it should be done. When you say that cities are going to be growth centers and cities require huge amount of construction and infrastructure and public works, then an urban Manrega can be suitably fine-tuned to match both the requirement of the underprivileged living in cities to get honorable jobs and a steady cash flow through that scheme, and the construction and infra and public works industries to get the benefit of that labor working in urban areas and not going back to their homes. So the straight answer to your question is yes, there should be a scheme for urban Manrega to match many of the good things that have been achieved by this country in rural Manrega. It has been a very good safety net in rural India. There is another question which I will want to link with a point that Shailesh made earlier about municipal financing. See, at the end of the day, the 74th Amendment to the Constitution envisaged urban local bodies and cities to be in charge of their own destinies. They cannot be in charge of their own destinies if they have to only look towards the state capital to get funding. So the real way, I think, and I am personally, a lot of advocacy has been done over the last 2 years by many people involved with urban infrastructure. And this budget, I am actually expecting, I may be disappointed, but I am expecting the finance minister to raise the issue of creating and galvanizing a municipal bonds market. America has the largest number of what is called munis, municipal funds that fund cities from New York to Los Angeles. Munis fund urban development and infrastructure in USA and many countries in the world. But it is a minuscule capital market instrument in India. A lot of research have to be done. I understand that municipalities have to do double entry bookkeeping, they have to collect property taxes, user fee charges, etc., 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 including the political leadership of municipalities. But you need to kickstart the process, and nothing better than the budget making an announcement or its intention to galvanize the municipal bonds market. Let me rest my case.
No, absolutely. I think that would really be an interesting move. We have about 6 minutes, so I'm going to go around the table again. Tell me the two things you want to hear in the budget specifically that you think are really vital for your sector or your space. Khair, let me start with you. You're on mute.
First of all, I would say and reiterate that what I'm looking at the budget is that the real estate should be given an infrastructure status, which would
Okay.
actually help boost the investment. Secondly, we are looking at India with a lot of demand coming from R&D, warehousing, logistics. So that is one aspect where I would look at the budget would give some scope for these investments. I mean, the country is poised for this growth in life sciences, R&D. A special policy focus should be aimed at attracting investment in these segments in real estate, which would provide a greater platform for the future and
Okay.
help in attracting investment, accelerating demand, and supporting a higher growth trajectory. That
Perfect.
is one. Then we are looking at, we are seeing that there is a revival in occupancy. I mean, we have a hybrid work from home happening. So we are looking at some stops being given for the social infrastructure like the retail, travel and tourism, hospitality, and other commercial places. So I would look at that from the budget, a focus
Okay.
in the budget.
Okay, so that's three, but since we're wishing, why not? So we've got infrastructure status, we've got broadening the scope, and we've got looking at social infra. Mr. Hiranandani, the two things you want to hear in this budget.
I think for the home loan segment, I think 5 lakhs of rupees reduction instead of 2. Rental housing, I think deduction going up from 30% to 50% in order to do it. A focus on more infrastructure, supporting the local governments like or the municipal corporations like metro, water, sewage treatment plants, water recycling, availability of other things, because the GDP growth is all going to be in the cities and employment is coming into the cities, whether, of course, they talk about the 100 metros. So I think that is something where I think the number of infrastructure created in terms of requirement of cities is certainly too slow, too little. We need that to be a big boost this year.
Okay, so taxation relief and
including health infrastructure.
Got it. Everyone's getting in 3, not 2. Shailesh, your list.
I'll stick with 2.
Okay.
My first would be an incentive scheme for state governments to increase property tax in cities, because the way it's currently, you pay much more for your cable TV subscriptions and your mobile bills than your annual property tax on your own home. So this is the single biggest revenue for all cities worldwide, and we have to get cities to start levying more property tax. The second would be operationalizing NABFED, the DFI, because Mr. Kamath is a non-executive chairman, and I think 2 or 3 senior level hires need to be made. The quicker the better, so that by April we are in a position to see NABFED giving out loans. Thank you. That's 2.
That is Vinayak. Last word with you.
I'll stick with 2, which is 2 main points. I would expect a 25% outlay over last year. So I'd expect budgetary outlay to be 7 lakh crores. I would expect the finance ministry to come up with a very strong push on the 29th October notification of the finance ministry on reforms in public procurement, which mandate payment of a bill, running bill in 10 days and a final bill in 28 days. And since you allowed others, I will make 3 quick subsidiary points. Policy announcements on revamping SEZs, creating municipal bonds, and greater transparency in the operating ratio of the railway budget. That's it.
Who am I to allow, Vinayak? We'll all just find out on budget day, and I'm sure you and I will speak after on what made it and what didn't. But thank you all very much. Such an engaging conversation. Thank you for joining in, weighing in, and really laying out the situation as is. I'm going to wind it down over here for our conversation on infrastructure, but the conversations continue with Mint. We're going to be talking about FMCG through the day, fintech, we'll talk about collaboration. So there's plenty going into the big event on the 1st of February. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to everyone who's been watching. We'll see you in just a minute.
Thank you, Mithali. Thank you so much.